All right guys, so these are the linear bearings. These are for the y-axis. You need 2 of them because the x-axis sits on top of them and they kind of move concurrently like so. This is extruded stainless steel metal, very high accuracy, so these are not cheap. These are kind of expensive and about 3 feet per pair. They run you a little over 150 bucks, which generally isn't that expensive. If you get them on eBay, you can get a pretty good deal on them. This type of linear bearing is one of the best that I've ever seen. They basically hugs on all 3 sides so that there's any type of movement in any of the degrees of freedom. It basically moves one way and that's it. Really high quality stuff. This is my favorite type of linear bearing. There's other types out there that are just not as good. They are cheaper too, so depending on your budget, see how things go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to install these guys on top of the chassis. They're going to be tapped M4 threads on all these holes, and they're going to be installed as parallel as possible, and that's why I'm going to use my red rod here. This thing basically will set the distance to make sure that it's exactly the same distance apart throughout the entire run. If they are not parallel, you will get skewing. The motor will need to work harder in order to get over that hump if it's not exactly the same, and the acme threads might end up getting galled over time. So take a look. In order to mark my holes, I'm essentially going to use the tip of this paint marker. It's the perfect diameter to fit right inside the hole. And I'll mark all the holes here as they sit right now. And when I take the axes off in order to drill the holes, they'll be perfectly placed. There's a little bit of tolerance in the holes, and the threads that I'm going to be using, the M4 threads, are a little smaller than the holes, obviously. So there'll be a little bit of slop, a little bit of forgiveness there. Now we can lift it off. All right, now we must drill and tap. Okay, so for the drilling and tapping operation, I'm going to be using a 1/8 inch drill bit with an M4 by 0.7 thread. I'm going to be using my drill to drill the holes in the approximate location where I mark them, and then use the drill bit. And then I'm going to use the tap with the drill and a little bit of grease and tap them all up. Alright guys, now time for the tapping operation. I'm going to be tapping with M4 into this 065 thick wall tubing. The reason I chose it is not only because it was cheap, because it was thick enough to allow the tap to easily protrude it, but also allow it enough threads where when you screw it in, it'll grip pretty good. You can use a drill for this. It's actually not going to break the tap unless if you do it slowly, and you can probably bang it out in a couple minutes. I'll show you. Don't forget to grease. Okay, we get everything tapped. Now it's time to grind the surface down with a quick grinder just to make sure that there's no burrs that are sticking up that would prevent any type of misalignment. So I've already sparsed out most of the hardware that I need for this build, so I put it onto a little plastic bag so I know exactly what goes where. These are basically M4 by 0.7 socket head cap screws. Really fits right inside the linear bearing rail, and it's kind of concealed, which is nice. And they're really strong, and you screw them in there and you don't have to screw them out. Like everything else, put everything in loose until everything fits and then you tighten everything down.